What happens when a Hollywood legend sits down for what should be a simple morning interview and finds himself facing off against a host who refuses to show basic respect? It only took 48 seconds for Savannah Guthrie to turn a casual conversation into the most uncomfortable television moment of the year. The studio lights were bright that morning, casting their usual warm glow across the Today Show set. Clint Eastwood settled into the guest chair, his weathered face showing the years of experience that had made him one of cinema's most respected figures. Across from him sat Savannah Guthrie, flanked by Hoda Kotb and Craig Melvin, all three hosts wearing their practiced television smiles. "So, Clint, thanks for being here," Savannah began, her voice carrying that peculiar tone of forced friendliness that morning show hosts perfect over years of practice. "I have to say, I'm surprised you even agreed to come on. Given your age, I would think you'd want to stay home and relax, instead of promoting another movie." The smile on Clint's face flickered for just a moment. Hoda shifted uncomfortably in her seat, glancing sideways at her co-host. Craig cleared his throat softly. "Well, I appreciate the concern," Clint replied, his voice measured and calm, "but I'm still very much active and excited about my work." Savannah leaned forward, that smile never leaving her face even as her eyes stayed cold. "Active, sure. But don't you think there comes a time when people should step aside? Let the younger generation take over? I mean, you've had your time in the spotlight." The studio seemed to get quieter. Camera operators exchanged glances. A producer standing off-set put her hand over her mouth. "I don't think passion for your craft has an expiration date," Clint said, his jaw tightening slightly. "I still have stories to tell." "Stories, right," Savannah interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "But are they stories anyone actually wants to hear anymore? I'm just being honest here, Clint. Your last few films haven't exactly set the box office on fire. Maybe that's the universe telling you something." Hoda finally spoke up, her voice gentle but urgent. "Savannah, maybe we should talk about the new project itself. Clint, can you tell us about—" No, I want to hear this." Savannah cut her off sharply, her eyes never leaving Clint. "I think it's a conversation worth having. When do legends become has-beens? When does ambition become desperation?" The color rose in Clint's face, but his voice remained steady. "I came here to discuss my film, not to be insulted." "Insulted?" Savannah laughed, a sharp sound that echoed through the studio. "I'm just asking the questions our viewers are thinking. Someone has to be brave enough to say what everyone else is too polite to mention." Craig attempted to intervene, leaning forward with his hands raised. "Hey, let's maybe redirect this conversation. Clint, your career has spanned decades, and you've won multiple Academy Awards. What drives you to keep creating?" But Savannah wasn't finished. She spoke over Craig, her voice rising. "Awards from years ago don't mean much now, do they? That's ancient history. We're talking about today, about relevance in a modern world that has frankly moved past the kind of films you make." "Savannah," Hoda said more firmly this time, genuine distress creeping into her voice. "This isn't." "Isn't what?" Savannah snapped, turning to face Hoda with a glare. "Isn't the kind of hard-hitting journalism we should be doing? I'm tired of these puff-piece interviews where we just throw softball questions and pretend everything is wonderful. Someone needs to ask the real questions." Clint sat back in his chair, studying Savannah with an expression that was becoming increasingly difficult to read. "And you think ambushing your guests is journalism? Ambushing?" Savannah's voice dripped with mock offense. "I invited you here. You chose to. Come, if you can't handle a few honest questions, maybe that proves my point about you being past your prime." The studio had gone completely silent now. Even the usual background noise of equipment and movement had ceased. Every person in that room was watching this train wreck unfold with a mixture of horror and disbelief. "I've done thousands of interviews," Clint said slowly, his voice low and controlled, "with journalists all over the world. Tough interviews, challenging interviews, but I've never sat across from someone who seems to take such pleasure in trying to tear someone down for no apparent reason." Savannah's smile grew wider, more predatory. "Oh, there's a reason. The reason is that I'm tired of watching people cling to relevance when they should gracefully exit stage left. You're not a young man anymore, Clint. You move slowly, you talk slowly, and frankly, your ideas feel just as old and slow as you do," Hoda gasped audibly. "Savannah, stop!" "Why should I stop?" Savannah turned to Hoda with genuine anger flashing in her eyes. "Why are you protecting him? He's a grown man, a public figure. If he can't handle criticism, he shouldn't be out here promoting his work. Craig tried again, his voice steady but urgent. This isn't criticism, this is just being cruel for the sake of it. Clint is a guest on our show. He deserves basic respect. Basic respect? Savannah laughed again, that harsh sound filling the studio. He gets respect by earning it in the present, not by riding on past achievements. That's the problem with people like him. They think their old glory means they should be worshipped forever, no matter how irrelevant they become. Clint's hands gripped the arms of his chair. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but it carried the weight of genuine anger. I don't expect worship, I expect professional courtesy, something you clearly know nothing about. Professional courtesy? Savannah shot back immediately. Is that what you call it? When aging actors refuse to acknowledge that their time is past? When they keep making movies that nobody watches, taking up space that could go to fresh voices with something new to say? My films have audiences, Clint replied, his voice gaining strength. People who appreciate storytelling that has depth and meaning, not just flashy effects and empty noise. Savannah's eyes lit up at this. There it is, the typical old person response. Everything new is garbage. Everything from your era was better. It's such a tired, predictable attitude. And it's exactly why you're out of touch. Hoda looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Craig was shaking his head slowly, his expression one of complete disbelief. Production assistants stood frozen, unsure whether to stop the cameras or let this disaster continue. I never said everything new was garbage, Clint said, his patience clearly wearing thin. I said I still have stories to tell. You're the one who turned that into an attack on an entire generation. Because that's what it is, Savannah insisted, leaning forward with intensity. You old guard types always hide behind storytelling and craft, when what you really mean is that you're scared of change, scared of becoming obsolete. Well, newsflash, Clint, you already are obsolete. The word hung in the air like a bomb. Hoda closed her eyes. Craig muttered something under his breath. A camera operator actually stepped back from his equipment. Clint was silent for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed what had just been said to him. When he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. In my career, I've worked with the best and worst this industry has to offer. I've seen talented people, and I've seen people who mistake cruelty for intelligence. You fall into that second category. Oh, please, Savannah rolled her eyes dramatically. The Wounded Pride Act doesn't work on me. You can't handle the truth. That's your problem, not mine. The truth? Clint's voice rose for the first time, genuine anger breaking through. The truth is, you're hiding your own insecurities behind this attack. You think tearing down someone accomplished makes you look strong, makes you look like a serious journalist. It doesn't. It makes you look small. Savannah's face flushed red. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me. You don't know anything about me. I know enough, Clint replied. I know that a secure person doesn't need to destroy others to feel important. I know that real journalists ask tough questions without resorting to personal attacks. And I know that this interview is over. You can't just leave, Savannah said quickly, a hint of panic entering her voice for the first time. We're in the middle of a segment. Watch me, Clint said, starting to remove his microphone. Savannah's composure cracked further. This is so typical. You can dish it out in your tough guy movies, but you can't take it when someone challenges you in real life. You're a coward. That word stopped Clint in his tracks. He turned back to face Savannah directly, his eyes blazing. What did you just call me? A coward, Savannah repeated, her voice shaking but defiant. You're running away because you can't handle an honest conversation. That's cowardice. The studio felt like it might explode from the tension. Hoda reached out as if to physically stop what was happening, but froze, unsure what to do. Craig looked at someone off camera, perhaps a producer, with desperation in his eyes. I've faced down real challenges in my life, Clint said, his voice low and intense. Real fears, real dangers. Sitting here listening to you try to boost your own ego by tearing me down isn't a challenge. It's just sad. And I won't be part of it anymore. Then go, Savannah shot back, her voice rising to nearly a shout. Run away. Prove me right. Show everyone watching that you're exactly what I said you are. Washed up, irrelevant, and too fragile to handle the truth. Clint stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at Hoda and Craig. I'm sorry you have to work with this person every day. You both deserve better. Don't apologize to them, Savannah snapped. They're fine. They don't need your pity. Actually, Savannah, Craig said quietly but firmly, maybe we could use a break. A break? Savannah whirled on him. Are you kidding me? This is great television. This is real, unscripted drama. This is what people want to see. This isn't what I want to be part of, Hoda said softly, her voice barely audible. Savannah looked at her co-host with genuine shock. You're both taking his side? He's the guest. I'm your colleague. We work together every single day. Which is why this is so hard to watch, Craig replied. This isn't you, Savannah. Or at least, I hope it's not. Savannah's face went through a rapid series of expressions. Shock, anger, hurt, and then back to anger. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. I'm the only one here willing to ask hard questions, and I'm being treated like the villain. There's a difference between hard questions and cruelty, Clint said, his microphone now completely removed and in his hand. A difference you either don't understand or don't care about. I care about truth, Savannah insisted. I care about not letting people skate by on their reputation when they haven't done anything relevant in years. My last film was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, Clint said flatly. But you knew that already, didn't you? You knew it and you said what you said anyway because facts don't matter to you. Only the attack matters. Savannah opened her mouth, then closed it again. For just a moment, she looked uncertain. Then her defensive walls went back up. Awards don't equal cultural relevance. They're just the old establishment patting itself on the back. There it is again, Clint said, shaking his head. Everything is rigged. Everything is corrupt. Nothing is legitimate unless you personally approve of it. That's not journalism. That's narcissism. The word hit like a slap. Savannah stood up abruptly from her chair. Get out. Just get out of my studio. Gladly, Clint replied, standing as well. And it's not your studio, by the way. You just work here. Something you might want to remember. Savannah's hands were shaking now, her carefully constructed television persona completely shattered. You think you're so much better than me? So much wiser because you're older. But you're just another entitled man who can't stand being questioned by a woman. Clint paused at that, turning back one more time. This has nothing to do with you being a woman. This has to do with you being unprofessional and cruel. I've worked with countless talented, tough, challenging women in my career. Women who could ask hard questions without resorting to personal attacks. You're not in that category. Of course you'd say. That, Savannah spat. The old, I'm not sexist, I've worked with women defense. It's so predictable. Hoda finally found her voice again. Savannah, please stop. You're making this worse. Making what worse? Savannah demanded. The interview was already a disaster because he couldn't handle a few simple questions. Simple questions? Craig's voice carried genuine disbelief now. You called him obsolete to his face. You questioned his relevance, his talent, his right to even be here. Those weren't questions. They were attacks. Savannah looked at Craig like he'd betrayed her. I thought you had my back. I do have your back, Craig said quietly. That's why I'm telling you this isn't okay. This isn't who we are as a show. Then maybe I'm on the wrong show? Savannah said sharply. The studio went completely silent at that statement. Even the technical crew seemed to hold their breath. Clint, who had started to walk away, paused. You know what the saddest part of this is? You probably think you won something here today. You probably think this was a victory, that you showed strength or courage. But all you showed was that you're willing to hurt someone for ratings. That's not strength. That's desperation. Savannah's eyes filled with angry tears, though whether from rage or humiliation was impossible to tell. You don't know me. You don't know anything about what I deal with, the pressure I'm under, the expectations. Then take it out on the people creating that pressure, Clint said, his voice softening slightly for the first time. Not on guests who came here in good faith. If you're struggling, get help. But don't use other people as your punching bag. For a moment, just a brief moment, something vulnerable flashed across Savannah's face. Then it hardened again. Save your therapy session. I don't need advice from you. Clearly, Clint said simply. He turned to Hoda and Craig one last time. It was nice meeting you both, however briefly. I'm sorry it ended this way. We're sorry too, Hoda said, her voice thick with emotion. Clint nodded, then walked toward the studio exit. Every step echoed in the oppressive silence. Camera operators tracked his movement automatically, trained instincts overriding the surreal nature of what they were witnessing. Savannah watched him go, her chest heaving with barely controlled emotion. This is ridiculous. Someone stop him. Get him back in that chair. We're not done here. But no one moved. Production assistants stood frozen. The director in the booth seemed paralyzed. Even the usually bustling studio floor was completely still. I said, get him back here. Savannah's voice cracked on the last word. Clint reached the studio door and paused with his hand on it. Without turning around, he spoke one last time. You had a chance to conduct a memorable interview today. You could have asked about my decades in film, my experiences, my perspective on how the industry has changed. You could have challenged my views respectfully and created something interesting. Instead, you chose this. I hope it was worth it. Then he pushed through the door and was gone. The moment he disappeared, the studio seemed to exhale collectively. But the relief was short-lived. Savannah stood alone at the host's desk. Hoda and Craig both sitting but looking anywhere except at her. Well, Savannah said, her voice brittle and too bright. That was certainly dramatic. Should we go to commercial? No one answered her. A producer finally walked onto the set, moving quickly towards Savannah with a grim expression. We need to talk, the producer said quietly. Offset, now. Savannah's facade cracked a little more. We're in the middle of a show. The show is over, the producer replied flatly. Let's go. For a moment, it looked like Savannah might argue. Then her shoulders sagged slightly and she followed the producer off set, leaving Hoda and Craig sitting in stunned silence. Hoda was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. What just happened? Craig shook his head slowly. I have no idea, but I know I never want to see anything like that again. In the makeup room down the hall, Clint was being helped out of his television makeup by an apologetic assistant who kept saying she was sorry, though for what exactly, she didn't seem sure. Clint was gracious to her, thanking her for her help, his natural courtesy a stark contrast to what had just transpired on set. Back in the studio, technicians were beginning to move again, though with uncertain, hesitant movements. Someone was on a phone, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. Another person was reviewing footage, their face pale as they watched the confrontation play back on a monitor. Hoda looked at the empty guest chair where Clint had been sitting just minutes ago. We should have stopped it sooner. How? Craig asked, though his voice carried agreement with the sentiment. She just kept going. Every time we tried to redirect, she just pushed harder. I know, Hoda said miserably, but that doesn't make me feel any better about sitting here and watching it happen. In the hallway outside the studio, voices were rising. Savannah's voice, defensive and angry, mixed with the producer's lower, more controlled tones. Though the words were muffled, the emotion was clear even through the walls. A production assistant approached Hoda and Craig. They're asking if you two can do a segment together to fill the time. Just something light, something normal. Normal, Craig repeated the word like it was foreign. Right, normal. But they stood, professional instincts kicking in despite the emotional turmoil. The show had to go on, even after a disaster. Especially after a disaster. In the lobby of the building, Clint was shaking hands with security guards who had always been friendly to him during his previous visits to the network. They wished him well, their faces showing. They'd heard what happened, even though it had only been minutes. You handled that with more grace than I would have, one guard said quietly. Clint managed a small smile. Anger only makes things worse. She's got her own issues to work through. I just won't be there when she does. Outside, the morning sun was bright, the city alive with its usual energy. People walked past the building with no idea what had just occurred inside. For them, it was just another day. For Clint, it was a reminder that sometimes the most challenging moments come from the places you least expect them. His car pulled up and he climbed in, settling into the back seat with a deep breath. The driver asked if he was okay, concern evident in her voice. Word had already spread through the crew. I'm fine, Clint assured her. Just ready to be away from here. As the car pulled away from the curb, Clint looked back at the building one last time. Somewhere in there, Savannah was probably still arguing, still defending what she'd done, still convinced she'd been right. Or maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to realize the cost of what had happened. But that wasn't his concern anymore. He'd said what he needed to say. He'd stood his ground without stooping to her level. And now he was leaving it all behind, moving forward to the next thing, whatever that might be. Back in the studio, Hoda and Craig were doing their best to create normal television, talking about an upcoming concert series with forced enthusiasm. But everyone watching could see the strain in their smiles, could hear the slight tremor in their voices. The shadow of what had happened hung over everything. And in an office upstairs, network executives were having very serious conversations about what they'd just witnessed, about liability and public relations and the future of their morning show. Phones were ringing constantly. Social media was already exploding with reaction from the studio audience members who'd witnessed everything firsthand. But through it all, one thing was clear. What should have been a simple morning interview, a pleasant conversation to promote a new film, had become something else entirely. A moment where courtesy failed, where professionalism crumbled, where two people's worst instincts collided in front of cameras and a live audience. It was the kind of television that people would talk about for years, but not for the reasons anyone wanted, not for entertainment or insight or inspiration, but as a cautionary tale about what happens when respect disappears and ego takes over. And somewhere in that mess, amid all the drama and anger and confrontation, a simple truth remained. Clint Eastwood had walked into that studio as a guest, expecting a normal interview, and he'd walked out with his dignity intact, having refused to participate in his own humiliation. That, in the end, was what mattered most.